Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop. I called it Techniques for Parenting Triggered and Triggering Children. So when you're parenting a triggered child, it's really the child that has the most amount of dysregulation. When you're parenting a triggering child, they're most likely doing their thing. It's just for some reason it's causing activation in you. We're going to be addressing both scenarios. I do want to get into it really quickly. I don't want to waste your time. Parents are busy AF. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Celestina Brozek. I am a parenting coach, amongst other things. Some of you may know me from like astrology work or archetypal psychology work. I do tend to be in woo or mythological spaces a lot. Today's workshop is very different from that. These are techniques that I received from my teacher. She is a hypnotist. Her name is Melissa Tiers. These are all very much founded in the hard science of neuroscience. So I say that in case you're like me and you are a cynical skeptic. And I have to say, when I first started working with Melissa, I was like, self-hypnosis, I'm not a person that I can totally be hypnotized. Like I couldn't move my legs after being given the suggestion, your legs are too heavy to move. So here's what I'll say. I don't know if you know this about me. I studied astrophysics. I am very well versed in the hard sciences. I know what it is like to gather data, to test a hypothesis. So here's what I'll say. The proof is in the pudding is really what it comes down to. The scientific method, whatever, like empirical, like that's what it is. Basically, can you reproduce the experiment? And in doing so, do you get the same results? Here's what I want to say to you. You have to do this. You have to try it. You actually have to prove it to yourself. Do not let your brain do that thing where your brain's like, I don't like this. I don't think this is going to work. Speaking of neuroscience, your brain is not your friend, okay? Your brain is especially not a friend to like your higher self, to the part of you that wants like change and to break patterns and to like create this wonderful reality for yourself. Your brain is friends with like the creature you, the animal part of you, the inner child part of you. Your brain wants what's familiar, what is safe, what is comfortable. Okay, so just a little caveat there. Didn't think you were going to get that in this workshop. Let me share my screen really fast. And we will get started. I'll give you a little bit more information about me at the end, but I do want to get into this because that's why you're here. Okay. So we are going to start with, and I'll share this slide again at the end. I want you to watch me. Because I'm going to be showing you techniques. But actually, you know what? First, I want to tell you a really quick story, I think. Or maybe I'll leave the story till the end. I do want to tell you the story because I think it will create some grounding context. Okay. So I am in this coach training where we're learning these techniques now. And I've been playing with them, as I just said. And I had a really incredible experience the other day where I wasn't intending to use these techniques on my children. But I did, in fact, use one technique on one kid, a different technique on my other kid. I have two kids, a daughter who's 4 years old and a son who's 5.5 years old. And I remember thinking to myself, I did not have these tools even just 2 days ago. Like, I would not have been able to resolve this in this really neat, clever way just 2 days ago. 2 days ago, like I would have still considered myself a great parent. I would have still considered myself a peaceful parent, a respectful parent, like a generational curse breaking parent. But this would have turned out differently, and it would have turned out way worse, and it would have used up a lot more of my spoons. So this is what happened. I was picking the children up from school, and they go to the same school, but they're in 2 different classes. And my son's entire class, his name is Christopher, had received invitations for a birthday party. They were these beautiful, like actual paper, old school invitations, like very colorful balloons. And my daughter, her name is P, was very upset because she did not get an invitation. And she was like digging into being upset. She was not letting anyone soothe her. She was kind of ramping up. And the only thing in her brain that could fix this is for her to get an invitation, and that just wasn't possible. And so I tried connecting with her. I tried offering a hug. She was running away from me. She didn't want any physical reassurance. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about is when your child doesn't actually want like the regulation that comes with physicality, with touch, with like scent, you can magically use your words to create that in their body. And I did not do this super gracefully, by the way. But I just started talking to her and I said, imagine how good it's going to feel when we get to your house. Imagine how good it's going to feel to be in the warmth of the house and see how happy the doggies are to see you. Imagine Oreo jumping into your lap now. Imagine your papa picking you up and giving you a hug. Imagine your papa's smiling face now and you're smiling back at him. And it worked. It sent her brain to the imagining place. And I was asking her to imagine what I intentionally created was a very positively resourced story. So she calmed down. However, she was not ready to go to the car. So I don't want to go to the car. And so this is where I said this was going to be non-woo. I am going to pull out a wee bit of astrology now. It doesn't even have to be astrology. This can just be where like your kid's personality. And I'm just going to say that maybe. I just know my kid's personality. She likes to have the power. She likes to be in control. She likes, as does everyone. Everyone likes to be respected and listened to and to be treated like a stakeholder. So I said, okay, P, you're in charge. You get to decide when we go to the car. Okay. You don't want to go now, that's fine. You decide when we go. But what are we going to do now? And she was kind of confused. She's like, I don't know. And I said, okay, well, are we going to stay here till it gets dark and cold? No, we'll go to the car. Meanwhile, my son, Christopher, is getting super agitated because he's ready to go home. He has his whole routine after school. He loves to get to his video games. And he's like, now that he's hearing that P is in charge of deciding when we're going to go to the car, this is like really kind of destabilizing him. And so he's beginning to spiral. He's beginning to get upset. So another technique I'm going to show you today is based on the fact that when we get into an anxious state, what is happening is that our brain is primarily firing in one hemisphere. So there's a technique we'll learn called bilateral stimulation, which is basically just rebalancing the brain in real time by using your body, because your brain controls your body as well as your thoughts. Luckily, he had a physical object in his hands, the invitation. And so I asked him just to start passing it back and forth between his hands like this. And whenever I noticed him kind of slowing down or getting distracted, I would just kind of offer a variation, like do it fast, do it high, do it low. And these are all things that you will kind of find your way into. I don't think I even need to tell you about it. But what this bilateral stimulation does is that literally just passing an object back, and we'll get into that more, balances the brain. So he began to stabilize, he began to regulate. Interestingly, his sister noticed him calming down, and she noticed that she was losing her power over him. And she kind of noticed that the story had been taken off of her. And she said, okay, I'm ready to go to the car now. And in the past, this has happened to me before. What would have happened is my daughter is really good at escalating. She is really good at just getting so into the tantrum. Doubling down is the word I was looking for. She's really good on doubling down and kind of recycling her emotion. She would have stayed upset for a very long time. And in the past, what I have done is I've either just let that run its course naturally, which is a time suck because it takes a long time, or I would have run out of patience. And I would have tried to keep a calm affect, but I would have said, I'm really sorry, I have to pick you up now, even though you don't want me to, even though you're crying. So I would pick my child up against her will, and I would carry her to the car, and that would just upset her more. And then I would be buckling her in while she was crying. I would be trying to keep tabs on my other kid. I would have felt like my attention was really unbalanced because now my daughter is getting most of my attention and my poor other kiddo is just kind of along for the ride. Her extended crying is kind of wearing all of us down and kind of slowly taking those spoons until we're all just kind of on edge. Again, not horrible parenting, but just this was better. They both went to the car, totally content. They were happy and playing in the car as we were driving to the house. So that's my story. And I think that's the perfect place to get into a triggered child, because that, like, both of them were kind of, I can see this working if like two kids have just been arguing with each other, have gotten into a fight with each other. I can see like if, excuse me, like if a kid has not gotten something that they wanted and they're upset. Just anytime your kid is beginning to melting down, upset, angry, crying, try these techniques. Worst case, they don't work. And you're just back to where you always were. But I have had such good results. And the other thing I want to say, and I'm a very circular presenter, I'm so sorry. If you have questions, if you try them and they don't work, reach out, ask me, I'll help you. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. Oops. Okay, here we go. So if you want to screenshot this now, go for it. If you want to screenshot it later, go for it. I'm going to include these slides somewhere you can have them as well. So everything I've written down here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, is all a proven technique for disassociating out of dysregulation, or for creating distance, creating movement out of whatever, like some undesired state. Okay. So the first one, I'm going to stop my screen share because I need you to watch me, is, I already talked about it with my son, bilateral stimulation. And again, the reason this works is it helps to balance the brain. When the brain is kind of really dysregulated and upset, it's primarily one hemisphere that's activated. So we are getting both hemispheres balanced. That's glue on the cupcake. My daughter put it there. It helps to have an object, like a ball or like a toy. I will give you an alternative way to do it if there is no object around, no physical object. I'm going to stand up so you can see my hands, okay? Okay, so basically, all you're doing, watch me, you can do this too. Taking an object, you're passing it from hand to hand. Is this working? It's getting calmer. You're crossing the midline. You're moving your arms out. This is something kids can even do at school with their hands very subtly under the desk. This is a self-regulation technique, okay? You need to do this for about 30 seconds. It's not immediate. It does work pretty fast though. And you can keep doing it. If your kid is getting bored of doing it, you can offer variations. Like do one hand low, one hand high. Or like do both hands low. Go fast. You know, like however you want to keep them engaged. Okay. If you don't have an object, you can literally use a pretend object or just say, pretend you're handing a ball off. Or you can do, this is slightly macabre, but you can say, pretend you're pulling your fingers off and flinging them away. And do it on the other hand, pull your fingers off and fling them away. Again, like you get to play here. Whatever you kind of come up with, whatever works for your kid, all you're doing is crossing the midline, crossing the midline. Both arms, crossing the midline. If it's not working, do it a little bit longer, okay? Give it a chance, 30 seconds, maybe more, depending on how dysregulated your kiddo is. That's technique number one. If you have any questions, let me know. It really is as simple as it looks. Let me go back to the slide. Okay, so the second thing that I mentioned in my story was basically, I call it suggestive storytelling. When my daughter wasn't letting me approach her, when she was very insistent on not letting me help calm her, when she didn't want to be touched, when she didn't want to be hugged, when she was running away from me, I was able to use my words to help her get into a more resourced emotional state. And you can literally use your words to tell the story of like what you wish your child was allowing you to do. You know, like imagine you're crawling into mama's lap now. Mama's so soft and warm. She smells so good. Your mama's giving you a hug. You feel your body relaxing. You feel your mama kissing the top of your head. It feels so good. You nestle into your mama. You know, you can do the same thing like a dad or even a pet. Like imagine their dog's name is Oreo. Imagine Oreo running up to you now. He's jumping up. You feel his paws pushing on your belly. Oh no, he's licking your face. You feel his tongue on your face. You feel yourself laughing. You're laughing now. Anything, you know. The one caveat that I will say here is if it's possible, I have a slight bias. I don't want to judge anyone. I think there's healthier situations of activating a resource state and less healthy situations. So, you know, you can say like, imagine watching your favorite TV show, but like, why not use an imagining of a resource state where you're killing two birds with one stone and you're also kind of fostering connection with a parent or connection with an animal or, you know, connection with an alternate activity besides screens or something. Like imagine how good it feels to draw, you know, like, so that's my one thing. Just you're the storyteller here, so storytell wisely. The third, and the thing that I want to just name explicitly, these are interrupt techniques. The brain is going down a neural pathway of being upset or anxious or like in tantrum mode. We're interrupting the brain. Okay, we're forcing it to detour. And that is going to, within the first 2 or 3 times we do this technique, that is literally changing the brain. That's rewiring the brain. Okay. So the third thing you can try, and I will say, you know, my daughter's 4, my son's 5.5. This bilateral stimulation technique that I showed you, my teacher, Melissa Tears, names the age of 4. I mean, these are great for little kids. You can do this with someone as young as 4 years old. Another interrupt technique that I really love, speaking of screen time, I really feel like this is probably the healthiest use of screens ever. This requires a little prep beforehand, but create like a folder or place on your phone where you have easy access to funny videos or photos. Obviously child appropriate. So kind of the stuff that I'm thinking is like, if you took photos of your kiddos being silly, like over Christmas, I was like trying to get my kids to look at the camera and they weren't. So I just had to amp it up a notch. And I said, smile like an alien would. And they each made a really funny face and I captured it on camera. So like that's a great example. Or if there's just like, if you've ever taken a video of your kids just being like super silly or crazy, or if you have pets and you've taken a video of like, you know, your dog going bonkers or like doing really silly, even just like cute animal videos. But I will say, if the photo or the video is of the child themselves, that's especially powerful, because that's helping not only disassociate out of this unregulated state, it's also has the additional effect of helping them associate into a more resource state. They will remember what it felt like to be in their body. They will recognize the memory when they see that photo. So you can literally say, hey, you know, and I think the screen is helpful here anyways, because anytime you're like, hey, you offer your kid a phone or a tablet, they're like, yes, please. That can help your child come out. That can be that interrupt that asks the brain to detour before we keep going down that pathway. And then, so those 3 right there, I think are, and you know, you can play. If one isn't working, like if the bilateral stimulation isn't working or they refuse to do it, you know, go to the funny videos or like, and then when they're in the funny video, you can just kind of slyly like put the phone away and then start like telling a story, doing the suggestive storytelling, maybe using the video as a jumping off point, you know, and then maybe when they're a little calmer, you can just go back to the bilateral stimulation. Another thing you can do, again, this is about balancing the brain, is you can feel free to try other stuff that uses both sides of the body, crossing the midline. You can, anything that gets them to disassociate. So you can say like, copy this pose, do this with your hands, but then do this with your hands. You know, like just whatever kind of gets them like, my mom's acting kind of weird, and ask them to copy that. But I think between bilateral stimulation, suggestive storytelling, which is telling a story. The other thing I'll say about the suggestive storytelling, watch your language. Make sure it's in the present. My instructor, Melissa Tears, says language is the instrument that can move us through time and space. What we are trying to do here is we're not just like cognitively getting them to think about it, getting them to really drop into like, don't just think about your dad hugging you. Your dad's hugging you now. Imagine seeing your dad's face now. Your dad's hugging you. You feel warm. I'm using present tense. I'm even using anchor words like the word now. So when you're doing the suggestive storytelling in the present tense, and then every once in a while, drop in an anchor word. Okay. That's for your kids. And I think that will help you because you lose spoon. I don't care how grounded and chill of a person you are. If your child is freaking out all the time, it's going to start wearing on you. So this will help you with your own overwhelm. Having these tools for helping to move your children through. And this isn't about ignoring negative emotions, okay? They get to feel what they want to feel. But if you have a kid like mine, who you know is going to double down to recycle, to really work herself up, yeah, of course it's great to have this tool to pull them out of it. Okay, so this is already going to help you. However, some of you may have a kid who is not, quite frankly, the kid you hoped for. You may have a kid that's very triggering. You may have a kid that's very hard to parent. You may have a kid, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here while I'm talking, that, you know, you don't really, if you're being honest, and it is okay to say this, you don't really like. And I think the other thing that I have to say immediately after that is it's not their fault and it's not your fault. There's just some kind of like trigger, some kind of clash happening there. I have a kid like that, so I feel like it's very okay for me to say these things. So this second part is if you're the one that's triggered, if the parent is the one that's triggered, if the parent is the one that feels themselves kind of like about to go over the falls, or like really needing to dissociate, but like wanting to stay present, or like really overwhelmed, or just like really constricted and anxious by what their kids are doing. So we are doing the same thing here. We are interrupting that neural pathway, forcing the brain to detour, rebalancing the brain, intentionally, mindfully disassociating from that undesired state, that like activated state. We don't want to be in that state. And this is also very powerful for self-regulation. Like if you need to self-regulate fast so you can go be with your dysregulated kid, or like if you need to self-regulate because your kid has just been kind of chronically sort of wearing away at you. So it's not so different. The bilateral stimulation is exactly the same. I'm going to teach you some other techniques that could work for older kids. For super little ones like mine, I think it would be too hard to explain to them, but let's get into all of these ways to interrupt the brain and to balance the brain. Bilateral stimulation, I already went over, literally the same thing, exactly the same thing. You're crossing the midline, you're passing an object back and forth. You can do like the finger pulling if you don't have an object. It works a little bit better when you do have an object you're passing back and forth. It still works if you don't. You may just have to do it a little bit longer, okay? 30 seconds at a minimum, I think. The other thing you can do when you're feeling really triggered or activated, constricted, angry, you can notice, how does that feel in my body? Like, is there a heavy pit in my stomach? Am I hunching over? Am I like shrinking back? Am I hiding? Am I, are my shoulders rolling in? And then whatever the yuckiness feels like in your body, however the yuckiness moves in your body, do the opposite. And a lot of times that's rolling the shoulders back. I've had clients do this kind of like move your hands up and out, literally open your throat, like stretch, which brings us to dancing, laughing, or shaking it out. Literally put on a song that is a great, fun song to dance to. You have never, not once, felt your body not start. For me, it's Taylor Swift. Again, laughing. Laughter is so great for creating a dopamine flow. I don't know what you and your kids do. Like it can be adult comedy, or it could even, be similar, like videos that are child appropriate or whatever. Laughter is good. And then even just shaking it off. Even if you just, this will probably draw your kids towards you, not have them leave you alone, because they'll be like, what's mom doing? Literally just shake it off, shake it off. Shaking your body. It's that simple. Rolling, shaking. I'm going to stand up again. Let me stop sharing my screen so you guys can see me. Okay, you know, and actually I'm realizing I was sharing my screen. So when I was showing you like whatever the yucky feeling feels like, if you're hunched over, if you're like, there's a pain in your stomach, this was what I was doing. This is the opposite, you know, and then shaking it off, shaking. There's also, we learned this when I'm a yoga teacher too, which I have a lot of previous careers. There's this little like arm slapping thing that you can do where your arms are loose, you're just letting them kind of slap your body and land where they land. This is like a midline crossing thing. But it's also like kind of a shake it off thing. Okay. I know these things seem super simple. This is why you can't just let your brain be like, it's too simple. If it was that simple, everyone would like be doing this. My teacher, Melissa Tears, has worked with renowned therapists, and she has literally had to soften the blow because they're like, holy shit. And then they're embarrassed, right? Like they're embarrassed that they haven't had these techniques in their practice and it could have been this much easier. She will literally have to soften the blow by saying, oh, it's okay. This is brand new research. You know, you wouldn't have had access to this up until now. So, you know, yeah, shake it off. Bilateral stimulation. Moving your body in like a very opposite way of how you feel, like the activation feeling. Laughing. And I don't mean like fake laugh, like, oh, like force yourself to smile, force yourself to laugh. Like actually have something on your phone that like genuinely cracks you up. I have this show that I love. It's called Taskmaster. It's like very weird British comedy. You have to find it on YouTube. It doesn't exist on any of like the Netflix or Hulu. There's like a couple of episodes or a couple of clips that like always crack me up. And then like when they stop cracking me up because I've like watched them too many times, I find another one. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay, so this next one that I'm going to, okay, so there's two more that I'm going to teach you, this soft focus exercise and tapping. And I am going to stop the screen share because you want to see my face. So I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember those movie posters from the 90s, the magic eye posters that like, if you stared at them in a particular way and you kind of like unfocused your gaze, this 3D image would all of a sudden pop out. It's kind of what we're doing here. And it's very similar to this idea of balancing the brain, because when you focus hard on one thing, kind of go tunnel vision on one thing, that activates, or let me put it this way, that is congruent with a fight or flight response. When you are in fight or flight, that is what happens. Your vision sharpens. Okay? The opposite is like a soft, unfocused gaze where like you're looking at the periphery. You know, you're not so strongly focused on one thing. So that's what we're going to try to do. So do it with me now. So we're doing this all together now. Pick something in your house. I'm looking at a magnet on my fridge and just look straight at it. You are not going to move your eyes, but you're slowly going to let your gaze just soften. You're going to sort of expand your gaze, blur your gaze out to the sides. You can even imagine that you're growing your awareness to what is behind you. A very soft, unfocused, expanding gaze. Okay. That is yet another interrupt technique, and that's probably the most subtle one of them all. Like if you're in, you know, a board meeting or like at work, or even if you're on a Zoom call, literally just inviting your gaze to become soft, blurred. And you can play with like focusing in. going out of focus, focusing, going out of focus, especially if this technique is not very familiar to you. And if you kind of had a hard time accessing what I was talking about. Repetition counts. That's another big thing here. Repetition counts. So the more you practice this, the more you practice anything, the better you get at it, the easier it is to access. The last thing I want to teach you is tapping. Tapping, here's something fun. Tapping is very woo. Until I took this course with Melissa Tiers, I was decidedly anti-tapping. I was like, this is just fucking weird. I don't think this is helping me. I'm a person that really needs to know the why. You can't just tell me to do something and expect me to trust you. Like, you need to tell me, like, what is the science behind this? Why is this working? So in case any of you are like that, and you don't have to use tapping, I just give you a ton of other techniques to use. I've been using tapping, and this is not the full tapping routine, you'll be happy to know. This is Melissa's New York version, so it's fast. The reason that tapping works is it's just another disassociative technique, okay? It is, again, it's creating that roadblock. Your brain is going down this path of activation, of getting triggered, of like feeling like the anxiety ramping. It's going to interrupt that. Your brain is going to be forced to detour. After we do that a couple of times with the trigger, even just 2, 3, 4 times, if the same thing about your kid triggers you, and you do this 4 times when that trigger is occurring, you're already rewiring your brain. You're asking your brain to step out instead of step deeper into that state of dysregulation. That's all it is. It's a disassociative technique. And if you want to add fancy mantras while you're tapping, do so. You do not have to. So let me show you. It's super simple. I'm going to push my hair back a little bit because the first place that we're tapping is the top of our head. We're tapping the top of our head. Next, we're taking 3 fingers. We're tapping right here. We're tapping kind of third eye and the eyebrows. Spend some time on each point. Next, we're finding like the bone here, the side of the eye, like the top of the cheekbone, kind of this like ocular cavity. We're tapping here. Next, same thing. We're finding like the ocular cavity bone right here. You can feel it. We're tapping right there. Next, we're thumping the chest. Don't have to make that sound, but we're thumping the chest. We're not tapping. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our wrist with our thumb kind of across these pressure points. I don't know if you guys can see that. Deep breath in, hold for a second. Breathe out for twice as long as the in-breath. Okay, I'm going to do it one more time. Tapping the top of the head, this third eye, eyebrows, the bone on the side of the eye, the bone below the eye, thumping the chest, grabbing the wrist with an inhale and a twice as long exhale. And you can just rinse and repeat that. I think some people like have a, I release and let this go. I release and let this fucking go. Melissa, shit. I just cursed again. This was supposed to be a clean recording. She's a New Yorker. You can throw in curse words. And you can kind of play with what feels right to say and doesn't feel like forced or programmed to say. So it could be as simple as I'm trying to let this go, right? I'm trying to change my brain. Or don't say anything. And I think when I'm going to edit the blah, 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 the slides to give you, and I'm going to write down the exact tapping technique on the slides so you guys can have it. Okay, that is for adults. You do this. You do these interrupt techniques when you notice your body getting triggered, when you feel your heart rate accelerate. Again, like when you feel yourself about to go over the falls. And when I say go over the falls, like it's getting like tighter and tighter, and you're like, I'm going to start screaming soon. Okay. Even the slightest amount of dysregulation, even like waking up on the wrong side of bed and just being like, oh, today's going to be a long, hard day. All of that counts as dysregulation. There can be subtle dysregulation. There can be very acute dysregulation. I just gave you 5, here, let me share my screen again, 5 techniques to help interrupt that dysregulation. Okay, so the bilateral stimulation, I love that one. It's so easy. That's probably the one I reach for the most often. Tapping is the one I do second most often. The soft focus, I don't actually personally do that often. Shaking and dancing I do. The laughing kind of requires you to be a little bit more organized, like you need to find something to laugh at. And then like moving the opposite way in your body, I think can actually be very educational for your body. There's 5 different things you can do to help yourself disassociate from this road you're going down, interrupt, and force your brain to do something different. That's very powerful, okay? Let's see what the next slide has for us. Okay, this is still for parents, okay? I called part 3 mental rehearsal. Do this when your children aren't around and when you're mostly regulated and you kind of have a spaciousness, okay? First of all, kind of alluded to this briefly. This isn't what this training is about, but I think it's important to name this explicitly. Grieve the fact that your child triggers you. Grieve the fact that it feels like you got an especially hard child and that your parenting journey is especially hard. It's okay to be honest about that. It doesn't make you a bad person. That honesty is actually really helpful. And the last thing that you want to do is layer shame and guilt on top of that. You are not the only parent that feels like this. I feel like this, okay? And it is okay. There is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to feel guilty about. This is the reality. You are here, you're being proactive about it. And it gets easier. You get more resourced, you get more practiced. Your child grows. This is not forever. But yeah, but allow yourself just to name that what you wanted is not what you got necessarily. Allow yourself to name that this is hard and it wears on you. And even allow yourself to name that you feel guilty about that. There's this thing where we feel super guilty that we're so triggered by our child. That's normal. Normalize it, grieve it, give yourself that space, okay? Talk to someone about it if you can. It really helps. Someone obviously trusted. That will help. That's not like a direct neuroplasticity technique though. This number 1 though is, okay? There is this quote that I love. How you see anyone in your mind is the best they can ever be in your presence, okay? What can happen when we are repeatedly triggered by our child is we can almost develop like an alert aversion or an allergy, or like we can almost like anticipate it before it's even there. We're like, we're telling ourselves a story in our head. We may even be like exaggerating it in our head without even kind of knowing that we're doing that. So again, this is a place where practice counts, repetition counts. It will be hard to do this when you're triggered. Practice doing it when you're not. You can still try to do it when you're triggered. Just see your child as someone lovely, innocent, neutral, right? Your child is neutral. You're responding to them the way you're responding to them for whatever bajillion reasons that we are not going to get into. But they are just doing their thing. This is like the way they were made. Okay. Your child is being self-authentic. They're being self-appropriate. Your trigger is unfortunately a you issue, not a them issue. Okay. Just practice seeing them as beautiful. Practice just even remembering their age. That helps me, just naming, like, she's 4, he's 5. Oh my God, they're so little. Like, their brains don't work anything the way that my brain does. Sometimes I even let myself just kind of be like, oh, they're still proto-human. They're like cute little puppies. Yeah, so practice seeing your child and accepting your child mentally. I called part 3 mental rehearsal. There is a way where when we're thinking about something, our brain is lighting up in exactly the way it would be if we were doing it. It is not a fluke that athletes pay people thousands of dollars per hour to do this kind of mental rehearsal work with them. You can call it self-hypnosis. You can call it, again, suggestive storytelling, but for yourself. Practice seeing your child in this kind of really, and this doesn't mean twisting who they are. Okay, this doesn't mean like if your child is very loud, like you're practicing seeing them as someone who's quiet, but practice seeing them as loud and lovely. Practice seeing them as loud, and that's not an issue. That's a beautiful feature. Okay. Okay, so this one's kind of harder. But also very powerful. And I don't want you to be discouraged if you don't completely get this, okay? That being said, I'm throwing a lot at you, and I did want to add this piece because I want you to have these tools. They're simple, they're also subtle, and you do need to practice them. The third piece is where we are rewriting being triggered. So, you know, imagine, so for me, one of the things that triggers me is my son has kind of a laugh that he does. I know, isn't this horrible? Like, this mom is triggered by her kid's laugh, but let me explain. So this laugh isn't like a joyful, natural laugh. It's kind of like this laugh where he's like intentionally trying to like escalate himself and his peers. It's kind of like a mischievous, mean, sort of like unhinged, it's horrible to say, laugh. But it's really triggering because for me, what it spells out is that he's trying to escalate the situation, and I'm already feeling overstimulated. And I'm like, why? Why would you? Like, why would you intentionally amp this situation? Yeah, so my kid's laugh triggers me. So the end result of what I'm about to teach you can be feeling completely untriggered, completely nonchalant, completely chill around something that used to trigger the shit out of you, or that used to give you intense anxiety or intense fear. My teacher, Melissa Tiers, does this with like super intense addictions. She does this with super intense phobias. Okay. And again, it's going to sound like so simple. You just got to try it. The first 2 parts of this are going to sound familiar. There's feeling triggered, feeling activated. What is super important here is to identify exactly what's triggering you. And so the way to do that is whatever like unhelpful feeling or activation you want to change. Remember the last time you felt that. You are looking for a very specific memory, a very specific instance, okay? And you are looking for a very specific trigger. The trigger is usually something that you hear or you see right before that feeling comes up. It's really important to identify the trigger. There could be multiple triggers. I did this work around an ex-boyfriend, and I was triggered by seeing his belongings in my house. I was triggered by receiving a text from him. So like, there could be multiple triggers, and you can work through each trigger with this. But for now, What's important is that you identify the trigger, and it can't be anything too vague. So my example, it's my son's laugh. I can hear it. And that's like what brings this like just super irritated feeling up in me. See me doing it with my body. And then so if I was going to do a disassociative technique, I would do like, so the opposite, it's like this jumping forward, clenching. So the opposite is opening and relaxing back. Okay. If you are doing this, and this is what I would recommend doing this when your children are not around. You will have to bring yourself into that triggered state. It is not enough to just remember being triggered. You actually have to feel it in your body. You have to associate into it. So you can't just think about the last time you were triggered. Or let me put it this way, you have to think deeply enough about it that your body feels it in the moment. Okay, you feel the tightness. You feel like the activation. But guess what? It's okay, because we have tools now to disassociate out of that. And that's exactly what we're going to do next. So the first thing is identify the trigger. What exactly is it that your child does that activates the living effing SHIT out of you? Okay. I'm guessing this is pretty easy for you. Maybe it's like a particular scream or a particular tone or like a particular behavior with their sibling. Or like maybe it's when they touch you a certain way. Remember the last time you were triggered, go into that memory, call that feeling up in your body. You have to be associated into the feeling. Otherwise this will not work. Okay, now we're going to disassociate out of the feeling. Okay. So now do whatever it is that the techniques that I taught you. You can do the bilateral stimulation, you can do the tapping, you can do the reaching for a laugh, watching some comedy, whatever it takes to distance yourself from that feeling and to kind of cause it to dissipate in your body. That's step 2. Step 1 is getting into the feeling. Step 2 is using these techniques to interrupt it, get out of it. Step 3 is thinking of how you want to feel instead, or more generally, thinking of any resource state, any happy or chill or good feeling that isn't the feeling that you feel when you're getting activated. So for me, obviously, I want to feel spacious. I want to feel nonchalant. I want to feel completely unbothered, or I want to feel like calmly joyful, calmly content. So the same way that you called up, you embodied that like activation feeling, we have to figure out a way to call up that pleasant resource state in our body. It can be through memory, just remembering a time that you felt really good and calm and confident, and remembering it deeply enough that that feeling comes into your body. It can be just enough to like do whatever the opposite body language is potentially. Watching comedy, just laughing. Laughter is a resource state. Laughter is a resource state. If you don't know what resource state to reach for, if you don't know like how you want to feel instead, just make yourself laugh, watch comedy. That's a resource state. While you're in the resource state, pretty quickly, as soon as you feel your body in that resource state, imagine the trigger. Imagine your kid doing the thing. Imagine your kid laughing the laugh, screaming the scream. Okay, and then notice what's going on for you. And a lot of times it will feel weird. It will feel like two different states are like vying to take the place. It'll be like, well, I want to feel happy. I want to feel triggered, or it might just feel weird. Okay. That 4-step sequence finding the trigger, finding that like whatever that the state that you don't want, disassociating out of it, associating into a resource state, and like really quickly, once you're in that resource state, because it's not going to be there long, emotions, unless we keep ramping them up and recycling them, last 90 seconds or less. probably closer to 60 seconds in our body. So as soon as you feel resourced, think of the trigger. Okay, you are literally rewiring your brain and you're doing it just sitting there. Okay. And you can keep looping. You can keep, laughter, happiness, calmness, thinking of my kids laugh. Oh, it feels weird. Okay, I'm in this kind of weird place right now. Like, let me go back to whatever, disassociating. Okay. The resource state again. How do I want to feel? Do I need to watch another comedy clip? Okay, this comedy clip just made me laugh. Think of my kids laugh. Okay. Okay, it doesn't feel quite so bad. I don't feel quite so triggered now. Okay. Interesting though. Like still don't feel great. I still feel kind of weird. That's fine. Do the tapping, or whatever. Do the focused gaze, whatever. Okay, get yourself back into a resource state. Watch another comedy clip. Imagine yourself completely unbothered. As soon as you really feel yourself in that resource state, in your body, authentically, don't lie to yourself. It's not going to help. You have to actually get there, and it might be hard. That's why the comedy is so easy. Like, if you're just laughing immediately, think of your kids laugh, or think of, whatever your kid does. The more that you do that copy paste of like putting yourself in the resource state, imagining the trigger, the more it's going to detour your brain. Okay. And at first, the first time those two kind of states meet, the first time the resource state meets the trigger, it feels weird. As you do this copy and paste over and over again, it should start to feel like the resource state is feeling more and more comfortable in the presence of the trigger. Until, like, mentally, when you're mentally rehearsing this, you will copy and paste, you will take that resource state, see the trigger, and you will feel the resource state in the presence of that trigger fully. Okay. And then you will go out into the wild in real life. You will in real life hear your kid with the laugh, or have them do the thing, and check in with your body. Like, has your state of activation decreased by even 1%? Then it's working. Then that means after a year of repeating this exercise, or even after 30 days of repeating this exercise, if it decreases by 1 degree in real life, you will have decreased the activation by 30%. That's 1/3. Okay. When you go out into the wild, don't be surprised if this mental exercise didn't completely resolve you feeling activated. But even if it brought it down by just 1%, by 2%, and now you have tools in the wild. In the wild, when your child is activating you, go to your interrupt techniques, the tapping, the bilateral stimulation, okay? And when you don't have your children with you, do this mental rehearsal. Do this 4-step process, okay? And this is going to help, and it's going to help fairly quickly. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so we just went over de-triggering the trigger. And I think like I said, I'm going to redo these slides and type this out a little bit clearer, so you guys are really clear on this process. The last kind of mental rehearsal thing that I want to throw out is, and this is similar to what we were talking about in terms of just imagining, making sure that the way that you're imagining your kid in your mind is lovely, is beautiful, because the way that you see them in your brain is the best that they can be in real life. It's a mental rehearsal technique. This is literally just you imagining that your brain is a powerful storyteller, okay? You're just going to imagine what it would feel like to have parenting feel the way you want it to feel. And you feel the way you want to feel while parenting. Imagine feeling great as a parent. Okay, what do you feel in your body? What are you doing? Let yourself actually float into what you're imagining. Maybe first you're like imagining it on a movie screen, and then you let yourself kind of float into the movie and you become part of the movie. Maybe it's just like a kind of a vague sensation. Like, I want to feel spacious. I want to feel calm. Maybe you do this kind of imagination exercise when you're falling asleep at night. Maybe you do it while you're brewing coffee in the morning. Repetition matters. So this is something that the more that you imagine it, the more you're going to start creating that pathway in your brain. Now, the one caveat I want to give you here, let's see, let me stop my screen share and so you can see my face. The one caveat I want to give you here, what you're imagining is not your child changing. Okay, again, don't make this about your kid. That's out of your control. Make this about how you want to feel, how you want to be as a parent, if nothing else changes. Okay, things will change because when you change, the world changes. But yeah, how do you want to feel as a parent? How do you want parenting to feel? Imagining that feeling. And if you have to pull up a memory that doesn't have to do with parenting, or if you have to just imagine something very abstract. So my teacher, Melissa, she offers this. So, you know, the coach or you're kind of self-coaching here. I'm teaching you self-coaching techniques in a way. We'll say, you know, how do you want to feel instead? Well, I don't know what I want to feel instead. Well, if you did know, how would you want to feel? Or like, how do you want to feel instead? Or like, how do you want to feel when you're parenting? I don't even know. Well, if you did know. Or I want to feel spacious. Okay, well, how does that feel in your body? I've never felt spacious as a parent. I haven't felt spacious in a long time. I don't know. Well, if you did know, okay? Don't let your brain get away with that kind of trying to wiggle out, okay? If you did know, make it very abstract, you know, like sometimes a problem that I run into is when I'm trying to think of a resource state and I'm trying to think of myself in the resource state. I like second guess myself, or I'm like, well, I was feeling like mostly happy, but I was also feeling like a little bit self-confident. Imagine a movie star. Imagine someone who's not even you. But then you get to imagine yourself in their body. You get to imagine what what it feels like to be them. Okay. So if that's what you need to do, if you need to like literally copy and like move yourself into someone else to find that resource state, do whatever you need to do and play around with it to find that resource state. Or to find like in this mental rehearsal exercise, like, how do I want to feel as a parent? How do I want my parenting to feel? Imagine it. Let me share my screen one more time. And okay, so I hope this was helpful. This has been helpful for me. And I think sometimes as parents, we are so overwhelmed, we are so triggered that if we can ratchet that down even just by a little bit, if we have even one tool that works approximately half of the time, good Lord. Sorry, I'm getting a text message. If we have even one tool that even works, even a third of the time, that can be just like a lifeline. Okay, so if this was helpful, please share the link, share it with any mom friends you have, any parent friends. If this was like a lot and you're kind of playing with it, but you're not sure if you're doing it right, if you have any questions, ask me. If you want to work with me one-on-one, playing with these techniques, refining them, getting good at them, I am offering something called the Brain Changer Sessions. It's 3 1-hour-long practice sessions that are centering these techniques and teaching these techniques and practicing these techniques. The whole 3-session package is only $99. That's only $33 a session. So that can be like a tidy little, like efficient container if you want to practice a little bit as well. Okay, let me stop this share one more time. I really want to thank you. I know I said I was going to talk about myself at the end, but My website has all the info. Basically, I'm a parent coach, I'm a life coach, I'm also an astrologer. I have a ton of different modalities, which I think is great. I have astrology resources for helping you really understand the complexity of your children's personalities and kind of self-appropriate strategies to kind of work with them instead of against them, and to understand yourself and work with yourself instead of against yourself. And then I also have these very practical, very quick, like founded in neuroscience techniques, and then stuff in between. So that's me. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I'm going to let you go because I know you're busy. Thank you.